Today we have a huge announcement. Next week, for our 100th episode of the Balanced Voice podcast, we will be hosting our first ever live podcast episode with a live studio audience, and we would love to have you with us. If you're local to Houston and would like to attend in person, please email us at scheduling@crime-stoppers.org. We'll have a 100th episode celebration along with the live recording and some goodies to go along with all of it. Make sure that you're following us on Instagram at the Balanced Voice Podcast so you never miss out on big announcements like this. If you're not local, please note the change in schedule for next week. We'll be live on Facebook at 11:30 Central Standard Time, not 10 a.m. like our normal podcast release time. And for those of you that like to listen or watch on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, etc., episode 100 will be made available Wednesday evening. That's Wednesday, May 8th in the evening. For now, Rania and I spend time talking about some pressing current events and our amazing Season 8 guest. This is The Balanced Voice.
Sydney Zuiker, we're so happy to have you, our executive producer on the Balanced Voice podcast. Sid, so much is going on. First of all, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Just we're like all of us, like running, and it's towards the end of the year, and May is a crazy month with kids and work and life and plans and all of that good stuff. But it's also such a crazy like time in humanity, like in America, but across the globe with kids and just with the world. And let's just have a moment of hot topics. Can we do that, please?
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up kids because I don't have kids, but navigating all of these things on my own and then watching my friends navigate them with kids has been really interesting. I've had a lot of good conversations lately about how do you even broach these subjects? Like, what are you doing in your homes about some of these subjects? So I'm excited to hear about it.
Well, let's start with TikTok. I was asked about it yesterday. I was speaking at the Maronite Foundation, and one of the questions I got was, what do I think of the TikTok ban? I'm not an active TikToker, but you are. And what do you think about the TikTok ban, the potential for the TikTok?
So I actually have lots of different ideas that don't necessarily all marry nicely together. So on one hand, I do think that I like that there's a lot of conversation around social media right now and the safeties on social media, and that our government is engaging in this space because, like the internet in general, social media kind of took off without any guardrails or any barriers. And TikTok in particular has a very unique algorithm, and that's why it blew up so quickly. That's why there's so much draw. The way in which TikTok analyzes and synthesizes data is completely unique compared to any other social media platform. And so that's what makes it so attractive. It's attractive on a global scale, but also it brings us back to the conversation about what's going on with our data as adults and especially as children. And that's a conversation that's being had in multiple spheres about multiple different platforms right now. But this is this is the largest social media app that is not owned by a US-based company. And over years, ByteDance, who's the parent company for TikTok, has, made efforts to show that they're moving where they house their data from mainland China to Singapore. And they even have a head of trust and safety who's a US-based woman. And when all of this TikTok ban stuff started happening, her face became very prominent on the platform. Every like 3 or 4 videos, there would be a video of her really trying to encourage the population that this is a safe platform. So on one hand, I'm like, okay, I love that we're talking about it. On the other hand, it's been really interesting for me to see the global response. I follow a lot of people on TikTok and have a lot of followers myself on TikTok that are not US based. And the sheer panic for people's income, for their well-being, I have people that I follow who have been able to move abroad and live a life abroad simply because they're creators on the platform. And that poses a lot of questions in itself. Is something that I'm interested in. And then also, where are students going to go? right now the TikTok ban says, will basically TikTok has to sell to a US based company or another company within 9 months. If they initiate the sale, they have an additional 3 months to finalize the sale. And if they don't, it will be banned. Now, banned doesn't mean completely gone. It means you cannot download it anymore on the app, or you won't be able to download it anymore on the Apple Store, Google Store. And TikTok, if it remains as a foreign-based company, will not be able to provide you updates. So that is scary. If there's security bugs,
Your friends abroad will still have full access to
they'll
it. So
still have full access.
people who have moved abroad and created a whole new lifestyle based on TikTok will still be able to do anything they want. This just applies to us.
Right. But
Yes,
much of the viewership is from America. So
it's true.
essentially,
Yeah.
their ability to convert views to selling products, which is what a lot of creators do, is just completely gone, completely diminished. And so that's an interesting conversation.
The whole thing that bothers me about this is I was asked the question yesterday in terms of, a government taking steps to protect, minors online. And I said, this has nothing to do with really protecting minors online. It's the US's attempt to make sure that a Chinese-based company doesn't have critical information about any American, how we run, how we do business, our interests, et cetera. So it's not even about protecting youth or protecting the mental health of any of us. It's a foreign policy issue.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And that's so frustrating because it doesn't further the conversation of protecting children online or the mental health of anybody online or the addictive patterns of these algorithms. It doesn't address any of that. If TikTok were sold to a US based company tomorrow, it would continue to operate full throttle in the United States and across the globe with what I would consider very little safety measures in place to protect anybody. So the whole conversation, to be honest, seems very fake. I don't know,
Well,
but it doesn't impact me directly either. So I'm kind of I'm
yeah.
looking at a different lens.
Yeah. And I think, well, I'm curious what you think. Do you think that the conversation around the TikTok ban could potentially even be harmful to some of these other conversations that are being had, maybe like through Sammy's Law, which we'll talk about in a moment, which is truly giving further protections and looking out the safety of our kids online? Do you think it could be potentially harmful?
I don't think it's harmful. I think they're conflated. So people think like, oh, look at the government
Yeah.
working hard to start putting in place protections. And it's like, no, this has nothing to do with protecting anybody. This has to do with protecting US interests, period. And not handing too much power over to a foreign entity that the US deems, um, I don't know what the word would be, there's animosity or controversy or, you fill in the blank, depending on your political perspective. That's what bothers me, because on the flip side, you have people like Dr. Laura Berman and Sammy Chapman, who've been guests on the Balanced Voice podcast many times, and were on this past season. Sam Chapman was, and they're really working hard to change the law so that these social media platforms can be safe
Yeah.
for children and their use.
And I think that that's something definitely to take into consideration when TikTok is even presenting, they're even seemingly trying to provide the narrative of, hey, we're a safe platform. That's the response that they're having. And then really US government is having, well, we don't want you to gather the data about our citizens and utilize it against us. And especially when we're coming up on an election year, that's a really big conversation that's being had, is how could a foreign government kind of be a key player in our election process? And that's a completely different conversation than the one that Dr.
But
Berman's having.
it's not limited to TikTok. We know
Right.
Facebook engaged,
Mhm.
Twitter, according to Elon Musk, when he took over and was going through sort of the back end of Twitter, they were, working to shape an election outcome. So it's all just so interesting. And I think at the heart of it, it is about the move in terms of TikTok is at the heart of it is about foreign policy.
Foreign
And
affairs, yeah.
and that's it, foreign affairs, and that's it. It is not about the protection of anybody, and or from the lens we look at, from the
Right.
protection of the user and safety measures to that degree. And I just think that's what's making it so frustrating for me.
I agree. I do think that organizations like us, people like us, have a really big opportunity to shift that narrative, to use it to talk about safety, because there are a lot of things um, that are being addressed in this hearing, these conversations that could be used to help us. And
Yeah,
I think it's an opportunity for us to say, okay, yeah, you're right. Foreign affairs, fine if you want us to not utilize that, but also the safety of our citizens is not being protected on these platforms. And additionally, we need to be forward thinking, because if TikTok goes away, all the users on that platform are going to migrate somewhere else.
yeah,
And so
exactly.
as we're protecting our students, where are they going? What are they doing? For a minute, a couple years ago, people thought it was going to be something called Lemon 8.
Mhm.
Not so much anymore. Maybe it'll just roll into a Meta-owned company like Instagram. Maybe it'll be something new, and that's a whole new challenge for parents and educators and organizations like us to figure out where are students going, what are they going to do.
And we end up right back where we started.
Mhm.
Right? So nothing's changed. But let's go back. Let's look at what Sammy's Law is doing, and Dr. Laura Berman and Sam Chapman this past week. California State Senate Judiciary Committee voted 9-0 to move Senate Bill 1444, also known as the Let Parents Choose Protection Act, of 2024, or Sammy's Law, onto the Senate Appropriations Committee. The bill would require large social media platform providers to, quote, create, maintain, and make available a set of third-party software applications to manage a child's online interactions, content, and account settings, and would notify the parents or guardians when a child account is interacting with a harmful solicitors such as drug or firearms dealers, end quote. I'm very excited to see that this has passed at least unanimously in the
Mhm.
California State Senate Judiciary. Don't know what will happen beyond that. Obviously, there's still quite a bit of road to go, but
Yeah.
I think this is where we need to be focusing time and energy and discussion. Again, TikTok ban for foreign affairs, foreign politics. It's another issue, and I'm not saying the U.S. government doesn't have a stake or reason or merit, standing, an interest in banning it and protecting the data of U.S. citizens. I'm not saying that. I'm saying from our perspective, it does nothing for the safety of the users. Sammy's Law, on the other hand, that's a huge move. And companies like Bark, my goodness, it's a tremendous win for companies like Bark that do basically is written to create a way for Bark to be on these massive social media platforms. As right now, it's not
Right.
allowed.
Because I think there's amazing companies like Bark. I mean, Bark is doing uh, Bark's approach to parental monitoring tools is completely different than anyone else. And it's truly a life-saving tool, but many parents don't realize that on these platforms that students are using most often, they're not allowed. Uh, what I like about this law, or about this, is that if this passes all the way through and is fully enacted, it requires a technology that can easily be turned on and off on a state by state basis. So this really paves the road for many other states and even across the nation, if it were to go and be federal, for us to utilize this. And the other thing is that a lot of these big companies, once they do it at once, it's easier to have it the same uniform, which is why when in Europe, there are stricter guidelines for data collection than here. A lot of times these companies say, well, if we're doing it for Europe, we're just going to do it across all of our platforms. So we've kind of been able to piggyback off of that in some senses. And I hope that that is the case with this as well.
I hope so too. It gives me a lot of hope that change is
Mhm.
coming. I do think, as you said, technology was introduced with no guardrails.
Mhm.
no limitations. We as a community, as a society, and legally, we're playing catch up, as is what normally
Mhm.
happens with major development. But the impact is, I mean, how much longer are we going to let this continue? And not only that, but the divisiveness of these social media platforms, which is another issue beyond the connections that kids can make online,
Mhm.
and the types of things they can talk about, they have access to, that they can get. As we saw with Sammy Chapman himself, purchasing drugs on Snapchat and having it sent to his home. Um, these platforms are trending into such hateful places, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that eventually, and I don't know that there'll ever be an answer to this. Sydney, we were talking right before we started on, free speech and protected
Mhm.
speech versus non-protected speech, and the riots we're seeing across the country at universities and colleges in relation to Palestine, Hamas, Israel, October 7th. And where does free speech end and hate speech that's unprotected, get triggered? And I actually think social media is distorting that. We no longer know because we feel so deeply committed to our beliefs, and we're surrounded in silos with people who are saying, yes, this is the truth, this is right, this is the truth, and we should speak the truth, that it becomes inherently tied to our First Amendment rights to speak, when some of the things that are being said are not true or exaggerated or hateful or harmful. They're deadly in a way, the call to kill all of these people or all of that people. I'm so worried about all of it. And I mean, what are your thoughts? You're watching it as closely as I'm watching it.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I wrote my master's thesis on the translation of um, social media violence to real world violence and kind of that progression. And what the research really shows is that people who spend longer amounts of time on a potentially violent or harmful or negative type content, that content, the algorithm continues to push that because you're looking at screen time. How long did you linger on something? And when we're talking about brains that aren't fully developed, something comes up that they're like, oh, what is that? They watch it. They might even click on it to learn more. And then that algorithm is taught because it's a computer, it's not a human, it's a computer.
Yeah.
It's taught this is what you want to see. So it pushes you further and further and further down that path to the point where it's starting to feed you more of this information, whether you really want that information or not. And then from there, you can find yourself in more closed groups that are more and more violent, encouraging more and more negativity. I mean, on a small scale, or very violent acts on a larger scale. And that can translate in the real world. Um, and on one hand, social media can be used for so many good things, for so
Yeah,
much good organizing,
good, of course.
but we're still learning how to navigate these algorithms. And I think what my brain goes to all the time is, okay, we're figuring it out with social media right now, but what are we going to do proactively for AI? Because I think AI could be used for so much good and
Mhm.
so much bad. And are we going to learn from our mistakes with social media?
The problem is not everybody agrees that mistakes are being made. There are a
Yeah, I
lot
know.
of people that think, oh, this is so great. I can go ahead and look at whatever I want and go down the silo I want to go down, or meet the people on the extreme left or right that I want to meet. This is the greatest tool on earth. And the expression, violent or not, hateful or not, is a tremendous asset that they want to see continued. And that's a concern. On a lighter note, because we want to talk about some of the podcasts we had this season too. Taylor Swift's new album. We're going to
Mhm.
totally shift gears. We're going to go from, you know, sort of what's going wrong in the world to when Taylor Swift announced an album. I'm like, oh gosh, this is sort of a bright light in the universe.
Mhm.
Her music she's just so brilliant. But Sydney, is it just me? Like, I am so frustrated as a mom of three and a Taylor advocate an
You were a
enthusiast.
strong Taylor. Everyone needs to know that. Swifties don't come after her. She's a Taylor advocate.
I am, but I'm not as much as my three girls or my
Or
husband,
your
who's
husband.
home listening to Taylor Swift all day. But why does she swearing so much? Like with all that's going on in the world, can't we just have a Taylor moment where it's not like F this, F you, F them, F everybody? I'm so turned off by it.
Okay, it's interesting to hear
Not a
you
big
say
deal or big
that.
deal?
No, 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 no. So in full transparency, I have kind of a sailor mouth. So whenever which
Never
I know you're
had
like
a
shocked
Taylor
by,
moment.
but I
I
do.
am.
And so it doesn't necessarily bother me in the context of adults listening to the music.
Yes.
And as someone who grew up with Taylor Swift, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're like, millennials, elder millennials really listen to Taylor Swift, grew up with Taylor Swift. But Taylor Swift has this unique platform in that she has people who are full grown and people who are 6, 7, 8, 9 who are listening to her music.
That's why it bothers me. Not for me,
And
for the
yeah,
kids.
and she is seen as America's princess. I mean, she is as famous, more famous than Princess Kate. Like everyone, the
Um,
conversation is, oh, if she and Travis get married, it'll be the American royal wedding, blah, blah, blah. And so, what does that say to our youngest population listening to
Okay, wait,
her?
wait, hold on. If Taylor Swift and Travis get married, you're equating that to an American royal wedding?
Absolutely. It's
No,
American royal wedding.
no, 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 no way. I feel like
Oh,
even though I love her and I love him, but like I wouldn't equate. Yes, their popularity as well,
oh
hers
my God.
especially, is through the roof. And having gone to her concert here, it's what she has put together is so unbelievably masterful. She is a poet, a writer, an artist, a musician at the highest level. I mean, at the highest level. I'm just so sad. And this is my daughters were saying to me, but it's not her job. I'm just so sad that she didn't take into consideration, or maybe she did, that 7-year-olds will be singing, screaming these lyrics, and my daughters are saying it's not her job to do that. It's not her responsibility. Parents can
So,
go and download the clean version. She did do clean versions of most of these songs. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but it
but
just
I think that the conversation is similar to the Barbie movie because we're looking at something that those of us who were young when all of, Barbie, Taylor Swift became really popular, and we're aging with her. And
yeah,
she's
encouraging.
um or even the content of her songs is so much more complex than it once was. She's really a lyricist now. She's talking about a lot of intricate things, and she does it in a way that can present um to still be, a poppy song. Like if you think of oh, what is it? I think I did it with a broken heart or something, and it's a very like upbeat song, and then it talks about how depressed she is and how horrible and
Yeah,
hard her life was. But we
and
have
the
little
video
girls
is
who are
amazing.
singing that at the top of their lungs
Yeah,
because she once was someone who put out these fun little bops,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
now it's really complex. And same
yeah.
with the Barbie movie. The Barbie movie, everyone, I mean, when I went to see it, it was full of little girls. And then you get into the content of that movie and you're like, ooh, this is not for little kids.
Not what I thought at all going into the Barbie movie.
And so what is the responsibility of an entertainer, an artist, and what is the responsibility of a mom, a parent to be like,
Yeah.
ooh, maybe this is no longer um appropriate or what I choose to have my little ones exposed to.
And I appreciate that there's a clean version. And I agree, it's not
Yeah.
her job to be a parent or to step in or create content that is appropriate for every household. And different households have different rules. And I have sort of a very sensitive ear to language. I
Mhm.
don't know why.
So does my mom. Yeah.
And to me, it's about sort of like, I don't, it doesn't matter. But
Mhm.
I think when you have amassed a fan base the way she has, and she knows her fan base trends low. She's
Yeah.
not doing friendship bracelets for the 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds at the concert. The friendship bracelets and the t-shirts and the lights and whatever are for the younger. She's
Hmm.
really catering to them. That's a market for her. And she makes millions and millions, if not billions of dollars off of them. I do think it's important to be sensitive to it. And it's not necessary. The other thing, she's so brilliant that
Yeah.
she has such a masterful way of speaking and expressing herself that yes, those words add poignancy that others don't, but she could also have gotten around them. So silly. I was curious what your thoughts were. It's sort of current news. My husband's really upset. She mentioned, mentioned the Kim Kardashian issue and then kind of alluded to the fact that her daughter North was going to be singing Taylor Swift songs. He said, it's a new low when you bring in somebody else's daughter into the conversation. Kim Kardashian was asked about it, of course, and said that Taylor Swift needs to get over the whole thing. I don't agree with that. I think Kim Kardashian had her day. They all, her, Kanye, they did what they wanted to do, and Taylor Swift never really addressed it. And it's not fair for the response to be just get over it. It's done. It's old news. No, Taylor Swift has every right to address it and address it in her time. How sad is it that I think about these things in such detail, but I do.
No, and I just think I think it translates to so many real world situations. So I don't think that it's so silly that we spend a lot of time thinking about this. I think that um, even the relationship between Travis and Taylor and the family and everything has been relatable. And that's why people are so drawn to them. And so when you hear, oh, now she's bringing in someone's child, I think of how many times you hear, catty conversations between moms and what responsibility do we have to stop that, to not bring people's children in? And I understand her feelings. She's had a lot of spotlight in a way that not many people on the planet can ever imagine. And I think she's navigated it with a lot of grace. But it does just kind of, when you hear that, you're like, ooh.
I know. Although it is my favorite song on the album. I love it
I
because
mean, it's
I relate to it with Crime Stoppers. While they were
mhm.
Stones, we were building something. I'm like, we were building, we were building. You guys can't
And
do
that's why
what
she is
we're
who she
gonna
is.
build, and we're
Mhm.
better for it. We're better. So I
Mhm.
completely related to it. Okay, moving on because I'm curious about this last sort of hot topic, and then let's talk about a few of the podcasts. The last one I'll ask you about Harvey Weinstein Thursday. Thursday's ruling overturning Harvey Weinstein's New York 2020 rape conviction gives the mogul a chance at a new trial, and calls into question what evidence prosecutors can use. There's discussion that he might be brought back to California, but of course in California he faces additional charges. One of our own guests, Mira Sorvino, who is a tremendous advocate in this space and one of Harvey Weinstein's, was potentially one of Harvey Weinstein's victims. She said, horrified, the day after hashtag Denim Day honoring sexual violence survivors, Harvey Weinstein's conviction is overturned due partly to the Molly No witness testifying to prior bad acts. So she is just calling on people to follow the case and to make sure that survivors' voices remain heard. What are your thoughts about this?
I think that anytime someone with as large of a platform as he has had um, is convicted and then it's overturned, it does a lot of damage to victims
Mm,
who sexual assault from the beginning is vastly underreported.
yeah.
And there's been a lot of movement to, believe victims with the Me Too movement, and we've come a long way. But I have seen this shift kind of back to, okay, maybe we swung too far. Now we're seeing kind of a decline in some of the things that were being processed. But also, I do think it's important for there to be fair trials, and that's the argument in this case, is that this wasn't a fair trial and that um, his character was attacked instead of the actual crimes committed. And that's a really hard conversation to have, and one that we often have to have with victims that we work with through Crime Stoppers is you want that case, when you go to trial, you want everything to go textbook perfect. You do not want to do anything that would cause a a conviction to be overturned, because that's
Right.
even more devastating.
For sure. For sure.
Um, I hope that he goes back to trial. I really do. And I hope that it's a clean trial. But I think that that's something that attorneys need to be really cognizant of, because these are people's lives. I mean, you're putting a victim through this and then traumatizing them and re-traumatizing them and re-traumatizing them. And those victims who think that they got a conviction from this case, now it's overturned. I mean, that's lifelong, devastating, traumatic.
Yeah. At the end of the day, these cases, lifelong, devastating, traumatic, I think are the words. They just leave a lasting imprint on everybody. And certainly survivors overcome. And we're so thankful to the work, to the efforts, to the changes in legislation that takes place, to the changes in the way cases are examined, investigated, run, all of it. But I just have never seen an easy situation or an easy outcome. It's just always so difficult. Let's talk about, before we wrap up, it was a fun season. You always say, and I always say, we love to be on location. We got to go to Minute Maid Park, which was so fun, with Crime Stoppers board member Sheridan Williams, who is just such an incredible woman, and introduced us to Jim Crane and the team at the Astros. They sort of opened their arms to us and brought us under their wings. Even in the year that they were winning the World Series, and after they won the World Series, Julia Morales was at our gala, and we were lucky to visit with her at the Astros at Minute Maid Park. So fun. I think all of our shows this season were great, and we talk about hard things, but we had some fun episodes too. And I would say that was one that jumped out as being really, really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I love a location shoot. It's just so fun for me. And who gets to film at Minute Maid? I mean,
I
come
know.
on. So to
Behind
get
the
two,
scenes was
I
great.
know. So to get 2 episodes at Minute Maid was amazing. We're really excited for our final episode next week. Um,
Talk about it. What can we say?
well, we can say that we're going to have a really fun. It will be our 100th episode. Can you believe 100 episodes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how fitting to be our last episode of season 8. I cannot believe that we are here. It will be a live episode, and I really want everyone to keep your eyes peeled on our social media for further information. We're going to invite a studio audience. So if you're local and you'd like to attend, you'll be able to RSVP and get further information about attending in person. And I think this is our first
It is.
in-person live
It
shoot.
is. Uh-huh.
And it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a big celebration for our 100th episode. And we're just so grateful for all of our listeners. I never, ever, ever thought that this podcast would grow to what it is now. I think we're pushing. I was trying to pull the numbers before we recorded this, but I think we're right at 3 million people reached with our podcast in 8 seasons. So thank you to
Thank
Rania for really
you.
shepherding this for 8 seasons. We've
We're,
had some
we're
great conversations.
we've had great conversations. Our great great guests, and Sam Chapman, of course, has been with us many times. Joanne Borgard, Amy Neville, Grizzy, Justin Reed, Parent Protect, Brock and Joshua Leon. We just keep living. The girls from New York who came to us right after, viral attacks that were sort of crippling the nation. We've had great conversations, and we're so excited to continue them. Our wonderful co-host Jennifer Homan, you, Sydney, and everybody at the team, Derek. I think it's been great, and so we want to hear from people as we get ready for season 9. Crazy. What do you want us to talk about? Guests you want on the program? Follow, subscribe, share, save, comment. All of that stuff means so much and really helps the podcast grow. So we thank you guys for your support. Sydney, thank you for everything, and thank you for
Yeah.
joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to do my little executive producer push. If
Yes.
you want us to have a specific guest or discuss a specific topic, you can put on any of our episodes on Spotify. There's a question box, and you can write that in there. And I monitor those every single week. And we will work our hardest to get anyone that you ask of us and talk about subjects that are really most pressing when it comes to safety. And then if you would not mind giving us 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to, that really helps us reach more people because we believe that we're providing life-saving information. So we're grateful for you guys being here, and please give us 5-star review.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. And see you next week for our live episode. It will be so fun. Jennifer Homan will be back. We have a special, special guest. We hope we see you there. Take care, everybody. And thanks again, Sid. We'll see everybody else next time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Rania's work by following her at The Rania Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.